That is James Mennie. He is over at the Montreal Gazette. So, Jim, couple of stories to deal with today. Look, it's another day, another Tory floor crossing. So this is 5 altogether floor crossers. And as I think we may have mentioned this yesterday, right? There is a rumor or two that there may be more to follow.
Yeah, and what gets me is like this one kind of came out of the blue. But listen, I was listening to you talk to our correspondent in the last segment about what to expect. What I'm becoming increasingly annoyed by the fact that in all the coverage and all the analysis, all the examination of what's happening, not a single person is saying, has the clock started ticking for Pierre Poilievre? Because I can't think of another political leader in this country, in the history of this country, who has succeeded in driving his party so deep into the ground, has succeeded in playing with the levers of electoral regulation to maintain his seat in the House of Commons, and then turn around and point the finger at somebody who, as you rightly pointed out, Madame Gradu today basically said, my constituents are telling me they want real leadership, which is the equivalent of hitting Poilievre across the teeth with a chair, as far as I'm concerned. So the question now is, will that media honeymoon, which has lasted, as far as I'm concerned, way past its due date, start to end, and maybe start really looking at the so-called Conservative Party of Canada and figure out whether or not it has a future? Because the bottom line here is, and we're talking, Poilievre tweeted this, and he thinks he should. The bottom line here is, if we look at the polls, if we look at recent events, if we look at the floor crossings, which I think you're quite right, I think it's far from over. Okay, and maybe this weekend's convention may have some more. Jack in the boxes going off. But the big question is, it's not so much a matter of what Pierre Poilievre has to say. It's who gives a damn about what Pierre Poilievre has to say. This is becoming a mono government. This is becoming, whether it's majority, even before this, we were on the cusp of this majority in Ottawa. Carney was governing as if he had a majority. And so there's not going to be a major change. And no, he's not going to call an election. It'd be crazy to do that. People don't want that. People want to have someone who, as I've said before on the show, Aaron, who at least looks and sounds like they know what they're doing. Okay? They don't want some annoying little game show host who keeps aping the same slogans over and over again, which is what Poilievre has been doing. And as far as I'm concerned, selling short his constituents, selling short conservative supporters who are, quite frankly, I think they're simply political orphans now. They have no place to go. But, I mean, we'll see what happens. But at this point, it's all moot. It's like what the Conservatives do or don't do, what they say or think or whatever, it's completely moot, because you never know. By the time you and I talk by this time next week, there may be even more Conservatives crossing the floor of the Liberals. So you know what? I think that's a pretty eloquent statement or if you will, it's a pretty eloquent report card for Pierre Poilievre.
To your point, Jim, it's like death by 1,000 cuts, or in this case, floor crossers. But I wonder, too, how does this work? So we know that at a recent leadership convention, right, he got the green light, thumbs up, you're still the leader. But to your point, if this keeps happening, can leadership or can membership just decide one day, you know what, okay, enough is enough, and we have to do something radical and make a change now? What's the process for that? Do you know?
I would suspect there must be rules within the party constitution that allows for a clearly ineffective leader to be recalled or have it reviewed. But remember, there was controversy over that last leadership review, saying the delegates were handpicked by Poilievre, and they were his people when they walked in. They knew what the vote was going to be. But the other thing, Aaron, is that, and sometimes you don't want to get tangled up in it because it's a bit of a swamp. But the comparisons between Poilievre's Conservatives and Trump's Republicans are becoming more and more vocal, more and more strident. In other words, no one is going to pipe up to challenge Poilievre's leadership, even though that leadership is demonstrably a disaster. And yet no one is saying, seems ready to say a word, or if they do say a word, they say, yeah, listen, nice doing business with you. I'm going to be a liberal from now on. And as I say, and this is the crazy part, he's supposed to be the leader of the loyal opposition, but if people are looking at you as a potted plant, if people are looking at you as a cipher who is no longer a part of the political equation of Canada, we've got a real problem on our hands, because as much as people, I'm sure, are ready to give Mark Carney the benefit of the doubt, we don't need a king. We need an effective prime minister. And, you know, he is human. I mean, he's a banker, but he's human. And who knows how much the ego can be inflated before we start seeing rather, how can I put it, obvious mistakes being made by this government simply because they figure they can get away with it.
By the way, it's interesting to note, right, Jim, right? You said a banker, businessman. For a guy who had no political history, he sure is playing politics pretty well, isn't he?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you know, he's either one of two things. He's either a natural or he's got some very good people in the back room. And I think it may be option B, Aaron, but for sure, everything's coming up Carney for the time being.
All right, let me talk about what's going on provincially. So we found out today that we are basically suspending the National Assembly now until May, so the new head of the CAC can have some time to, you know, get everybody, I guess, in order, whatever. But I was reading some of Legault's farewells. You know, he gave that interview to Ratcan, and I sat there and shook my head as I read some of this. And I said, you know, it's funny because every time you ask a politician about polls, right, when numbers aren't necessarily going well, the standard answer, and it's always like this, is we don't pay attention to polls, right? But we know that's a lie, and he basically said as much. He said he watched the polls over the last couple of months. He had intended to seek a third mandate. But when he saw the polls going nowhere, actually going worse, I think one of the polls had him as the least popular premier in the entire country. That's when he made his mind up not to run again.
Well, he's been, I think you're referring to the Angus Reid quarterly poll of the premiers, and I got to tell you, he has been at the bottom of that pile for at least a year, maybe more. I think it was simply, he didn't get it. I don't think Legault got it. I think it finally sunk through that if you do this, the only reason you'll be remembered is having led what would appear to be this hyper-successful party into oblivion. So to a certain extent, he's jumping off the plane before it crashes into a mountain. And it is going to crash into the mountain, metaphorically speaking, Aaron. There's no question about it. The other thing I found fascinating, because you're talking about these farewell, he's being interviewed by Radio-Canada, he's being interviewed by TVA, no English outlets. Because why? Well, I guess, you know, all that talk we heard over the 8 years, how it was the government of all Quebecers, mais c'est pas tellement vrai, you know? As a matter of fact, I think if somebody had access to an IA program, Aaron, or an AI program rather, I would love to hear an interview with a career-end interview with Francois Legault, regretting that he never went on Montreal Now, despite all the requests that he got.
Let me write that down. Hang on. Okay.
I think that would be a great segment to air, you know, in his failing days. But you know, I can't. We're talking about Francois Legault. I mean, let's face it, he's already left the room. I don't want to belabor this, Aaron. I told you yesterday, and I tell you today, and I'll probably tell you again tomorrow. Keep your eye on the bouncing Eric James. Did you see his little speech today? Did you see his little press conference with his survey? He's basically saying, you know, you can still enjoy the vision of the CAC without the CAC being around. There is life after Francois Legault. And he's pointing out the Conservatives, the provincial Conservatives commissioned a survey finding that about two-thirds of respondents in Quebec do want to have more autonomy within Confederation, whether that means, you know, slapping around the Prime Minister, as they used to do with Trudeau on a regular basis, or perhaps a more cordial relationship remains to be seen. But it's fascinating because here is Eric James saying, you know, why didn't Francois Legault have agreements with, you know, Ontario or Alberta or Saskatchewan, the way these other provinces have come together and made agreements for the vote? And his conclusion is, well, you know, he didn't feel like doing it. And the fact is, here's a guy, and I think it's a very interesting tack to take. He's saying, you know, we can be made chez nous, we can do the whole nationalism thing, but lest we forget, we are a part of Canada. And the two thoughts that collide in my mind when I hear him say this is, one, that's a very interesting tack to take on the eve of an election. And two, wouldn't Charles Milliard have loved to have said that before this guy did?
You know, as you said that, Jim, I thought to myself, well, wouldn't that be something that a new CAC leader would be interested in saying?
Well, not anymore, because this guy got off the mark first. You know, but I got to tell you as well, honestly, I don't think, with all due respect to the leadership candidates, Aaron, I think they're done. I think they can talk all they want. They can promise all they want. I think c'est fini. La rupture est complète with the people of Quebec, with the electorate. They just they just hear
Yeah.
it's Charlie Brown's teacher talking to them now. You know what I mean? Whenever it's a CAC politician, it's the same thing. Talk to me. Let's hear from the new government when the election's over. But this is it, and those numbers, the numbers keep going incredibly. The numbers keep going down, Aaron, for the CAC. It's nuts. You'd think, well, he's gone, and maybe there's no. The numbers keep tanking, and they're low double digits now. So who knows? I mean, they're fourth place. Good.
I don't want to dwell on Legault, but I did find it interesting in his address, in his interviews, his year enders, where he said he takes great pride in the fact that in two things. Number one, Quebec's economy, and I shook my head and went, I'm sorry, what? He says, he said he grew Quebec's economy faster than the rest of Canada, but he did not mention, of course, that he left Quebec with the largest deficit in provincial history. And then he went on, Jim, because, to your point about him just not getting it, about immigration. That seems to be the be-all and end-all for him as he looks back on not being able to get more immigration powers from Ottawa, even though we have more powers than any other province, my understanding, in Canada, in Quebec than any place else. What's that about?
Aaron, we have our own Ministry of Immigration, for crying out loud, which is like, that's kind of unique to Quebec. But listen, it's par for the course for this guy. This guy, even at the beginning, it's always someone else's fault. It's always someone else's tripping us up. That's why we can't move forward, because of immigrants, because of Anglos, because of this, because of that, because of the feds, because of whatever, because of my political opponents. It's everyone but me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But as I say, which is why I think the prorogation is great, because if nothing else, it'll keep these clowns away from the control panel for 3 working weeks, okay? And at least there they can't. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have every confidence that when they come back, they'll continue doing stupid stuff. But in the meantime, at least we have a bit of a vacation from the most incompetent government, as far as I'm concerned, in the history of Quebec.
Jim, I'm going to wrap up. I did want to ask you just really quick. I'm going to ask my question today about the federal Liberals who are meeting here this weekend. One of the things they're going to be discussing, we know now, is the idea of perhaps putting in or instituting some kind of a ban for young people on social media or AI. We know other countries have done this already. We just had a story in the news literally 10 minutes ago, that Greece has now decided to do the same thing. What do you think? Do you think governments need to be the ones in control, or is this best left to parents?
It's best left to parents, if only because I think parents could use some education when it comes to using the internet. But also, I think that, once again, we're going to ban this and ban that. Well, apart from, like in schools, getting the kids to surrender their hardware when they go into class, how do you enforce that? How do you enforce a ban like that? I'd like to see how that's possible.
Well, but it was done in Quebec, right? Kids can't take their phones into classrooms.
Yeah, but when you're talking about at the federal level, you're saying you want these kids overall. You don't want kids exposed to this, like ChatGPT and whatever. If they're under 14, how do you keep them from doing that? How do you enforce it? I have no idea.
Okay. Age verification. I mean, they do it in other places. I think where there's
a will.
Well, where there's a will, there's a way. There are ways to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim. Let's go to traffic. He doesn't buy that.
Unmistakably Canadian.
It's the music that raised you.
The artists raising the bar.
Hi, this is Bryan Adams.
Hey, my name's Brett Emmons. I'm from the Glorious Sons.
Hi, I'm Nelly Furtado.
Made in Canada. The station that champions Canadian music.
Loud, proud, and all yours.
No passports required. Just press play.
Tap into Made in Canada now on iHeartRadio.ca
or the free iHeartRadio app.